Hey there, church. I'm taking my midday walk with Strider before I put him in his crate, and I go over to the church to wrap up the bulletin and finish up the e-update. And you know, sometimes I feel a little bit jealous of Strider and animals and the natural world because they just don't bear some of the knowledge that comes with being human. I don't know. I guess on some level there's a chance that Strider feels some of the weight that we in our family feel at the news of the shooting in Uvalde and how this comes on the heels of two other mass shootings. And every time there's a school shooting, I feel like a little bit, not to the extent of some people, but just in a little bit, I feel re-traumatized from the experience that we went through in Geauga County with the Chardon school shooting in 2012. And I remember the time that I spent with students and families and teachers after that. Strider doesn't have that knowledge, and so there is a kind of suffering that comes as human beings for the kinds of difficulties we are aware of in the world, the way that we see and experience sin and evil, and honestly, I think this is part of what it means to be a bearer of the image of Christ, because Christ didn't live without suffering. He is the one who knew human suffering in full, both just by living an ordinary human life, but also bearing the pain of the cross. That wasn't just a physical pain, but sin and the powers of darkness coming upon his person, Jesus, suffering every form of human suffering there on the cross, a kind of soul suffering, bringing it down into the darkness of death, where God passed judgment on it and left it in the realm of the dead, as it were, in the grand scheme of things, raising up Jesus alive without any of it. Jesus as alive could be. But the testimony of Scripture suggests that Jesus, whose ascension we celebrate today in a lot of the church, Jesus ascended into the heavens 40 days after God had raised him from the dead. The ascended Jesus is not distant from the world in terms of his connection to it. Jesus remains human, fully alive as a human being could ever possibly be, in the heavens with God. But Jesus is connected to the world and the world's suffering and the power of the Spirit. Paul says that the Spirit groans as creation awaits its full redemption, which is to say, when all of creation becomes as Jesus is, as Jesus fills his entirely alive life, now fills the creation with his entirely alive life. And this is the hope of the ascension. The ascension promises that Jesus is that first bit of creation that God has fully redeemed. He is alive with God in the heavens, and one day the heavens and the earth will become one, just as kind of Jesus' heavenly life and his earthly human life have become one. And so his ascension as a human being, a redeemed and fully alive, made new human being, tells us where all things are headed. But in the meantime, the promise is also that Jesus prays for us. This is what Paul says Christ is doing together with the Spirit, praying for us, suffering with us. That he is risen doesn't mean he's disconnected from the world and what's happening in our lives. And for me, this gives me hope. It doesn't make anything better. It doesn't solve our problems in the way that we would like the world to be fixed, but it does mean that we are not alone, and that this world is not without God's love. It is not falling away somehow from God's great big purpose. All things are still bending toward full renewal, the new creation that God has inaugurated in Jesus. And so the question for us today is, how do we take part in the way Jesus is bearing with and even suffering alongside creation? So if you feel like you've felt weight and have suffered, that is good and holy work. But maybe there's also good and holy work for the way that God sends us into the world to bear his image, to show what love and power look like, which aren't in the end about getting power over people, about winning kinds of political victories for parties and what our conversations can devolve to. In the end, power looks like service. It looks like giving up one's own rights in order to seek the good and the blessing of others. This is what the cross was about, and it's what God vindicated when God raised Jesus from the dead and received him into the heavens as the world's true Lord and true King. So in the days to come, with whatever we're carrying in our hearts, let's continue to hold on to this hope. Christ is the Lord as the one who is the true and suffering and redeeming King. Let's continue to live as his people, loving God, sharing relationships, serving others from the heart of Christ.